Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Moen After Dark show here on the College Football Mafia Network. I almost forgot where I worked there for a second, but here I am. I am joined tonight by my friend Rock and Rant and all of you. It might be a shorter show than usual. I know everybody's trying to watch playoff games. We tried to do our best to work our way in here when it was the most convenient. And besides, I think it's important with all the news going on between the rocky relationship between Wisconsin and the University of Miami that Rock and Rant gets to say his piece of peace. And I have my own view on it. So we're going to get into that. But first, let's say hello to some people here in the chat because they were here early. Nathan Campbell is first in the house. He says, "Hi, guys. Good to see you." Ryan Willie says, "Hi, Moen." So we've got Miami and Wisconsin represented here. Nathan Campbell says Dak Prescott has been traded to the Titans. I don't think so, Nathan. I don't think they're that. The proposal preferred trade a first rounder this year and a third rounder. Yeah, listen. Dak Prescott has no experience deep in the playoffs. Right now, you've got a first-year rookie quarterback taking his team to the NFC Championship. There's just
Plus,
no way. There's no way they're trading for Dak Prescott.
Plus, the Titans just—I mean, look, I think we live in a world where there's like the words "no way" are just almost impossible to use because I've seen way too much "no ways" in the last X amount of years. Fill in the blank, whatever narrative you want. But they just did hire, if I'm not mistaken, an assistant GM from Kansas City to go over, and they need a quarterback. And that was rumored ahead of time that the Titans were enamored with Cam Ward. I would think that GM, having worked with Patrick Mahomes for the last several years, is very much going to probably want to take a chance with somebody like Cam Ward versus trying to see what Dak Prescott can do for him.
Yeah, and I mean you got to look at the last few drafts. I mean, first round, Daniels this year took Washington. He's taking Washington to the NFC Championship game, beat the number one seeded Lions. Just a couple years, Joe Burrow took the Bengals to their first playoff since I was a kid. So yeah, I think there's more value in having that first overall pick, unless you're getting a rookie contract. Unless you're getting a really, really, really good quarterback out of the whole situation, and that ain't Dak Prescott. Sorry, Cowboys fan. It's just you ain't never going to win with Dak Prescott
or Jerry Jones as your GM.
Or Jerry. Well, they have one with Jerry Jones as a GM. They have one with Dak. But they did. You're right. I know what you're going to say. You're going to say Jimmy Johnson from Miami. Fair point.
Well, they've won with Jerry Jones as their GM. They just haven't won anything with Jerry Jones only as their GM.
Right. They had Jimmy Johnson and Barry Switzer. Bob Swanger says hello, Moen and Rock and Rant. Hello, Bob. Good to see you.
What's up,
Bob? Antoine Coates. Hopefully it's warm where you are, Antoine. I was just telling Rock before the show, it is colder than Billy Hell here in Appalachia, and it's supposed to get a lot colder. With wind chills are supposed to be in the sub-single digits tomorrow, so about -9 in the morning. Won't that be fun? Caleb Ramirez says, "Hi, everyone. Good to see you, Caleb." Caleb's from Ohio, too, so he's probably cold as well. Stay warm out there, Caleb. Illini Ted, good evening, fellas. Good to see you, Illini Ted. I don't know if you actually live in Illinois, but I'm sure you're cold as well. Same thing with S. Michael DeHart. Let's go Mountaineers. Don't know if you're living in the West Virginia area, brother, but you're probably cold too.
Literally, let's go Mountaineers. Like, I think that's a team that a lot of us would love to see actually start going with the new coaches. Like, I'm not like a Mountaineers fan, but I respect the legacy in the program. So let's hope it has double meaning.
I am giving them props simply because for the national championship game tomorrow, there's only 2 states that are pulling for Ohio State. That is Ohio and West Virginia. So,
isn't there only like one state? Isn't there only one state pulling for Notre Dame and the other like 47, I guess, like want a bomb?
Well, they want a meteor to fall on the thing, but I think, listen, people hate us because they ain't us. Bill G
I feel
says,
you on that one.
good to see you, Bill. Bill G says it's 29 and falling in Dallas, Fort Worth. Whoa, that's shorts weather here in Ohio. Luxury. All right, so we said hello to some people, so we're just going to jump right into it here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and share an article that came up here today from our friends at Sportico. And I'm going to add that there. Inside a Big Ten athlete revenue sharing agreement. Now, let me pop over here and get you guys the link in case you did not catch this on Twitter this afternoon. This came out a couple hours ago. And there we go. So, a long article, worth a full read. But basically, what Sportico was able to do was they tracked down a memoranda of understanding from another Big Ten school. They do not name which one. And they say it has similar language to other Big Ten schools. I don't know that for sure. We can only go by what they tell us. But our good friend on Twitter, Mitt Winter, kind of highlighted the best parts of this. So I'm going to go ahead and pull his tweet up and let you guys, Mitt Winter. But if you want to read the full article, by all means, go ahead and read the full article. I would consider having an ad blocker on before you do that. Sportico is awful with advertisements.
Absolutely.
And look at this. We got gifted 5 memberships to the College Football Mafia family from our friend Bill G in the balmy Dallas-Fort Worth area. BR7062, Fearfully Confident, Kay Struthers, Jamie Bangles Girl, Daniel Gorby. You were all gifted memberships by our friend Bill G. Make sure you give him a thanks in the chat. Thank you, Bill G. We'll give
Thanks,
you
Bill.
Since it's in the high 20s there, we'll let you cook.
Let him cook. Let him cook now. Let him cook. I said let him cook.
And then since it's so cold up here, we'll get our friend Greg's reaction. Thank you so much, Bill G. If you were gifted one of those, make sure you do thank Bill G. Just let everybody know there's a new Moen Rants up in the members only section, and Ute will have a new Wild Ute University up here in the next day or so. So definitely, if you are a member, I suggest you check that out. Very interesting stuff. If you're going to watch the Moen Rant, I'm just going to say I say the F word a lot. So
just a little bit.
I tried making a short of it, and I simply could not because there was an F-bomb every 60 seconds, so I couldn't do a YouTube short of it. But definitely check that out, and definitely thank you, Bill G. It is much appreciated, you helping us keep the lights on here. It's why we were able to do all the good work that we do. Back here, Mitt Winter. There's this tweet. Share screen. There we go, Mitt Winter. And load Mitt Winter here. And I'm going to pull up each one of these individually and read them to you. I'll read what Mitt has to say first. If you're not following Mitt on Twitter, I suggest you give him a follow. Really bright guy, legal guy.
Super great.
He's a lawyer, but don't hold that against him. A look at what the RevShare MOU Big Ten schools are using with athletes look like. While the agreement uses language to try and avoid creating an employment relationships, its terms coupled with the amount of control schools exercise over athletes likely makes that unavoidable. Now, I want to be clear again. I mentioned this earlier. This is not the exact MOU between Wisconsin and Xavier. This is from another Big Ten university, but their sources are telling them that they use similar language, if not same language.
Right.
Big Ten schools are asking athletes to sign over their NIL rights, permit universities to sublicense the rights to any and all third parties, and surrender any legal claim to employee status as part of the planned revenue sharing structure. according to a
Can we
copy.
pause?
Yeah.
I have finished. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Just let me finish this. According to a copy
Yeah.
of an agreement that was viewed by Sportico.
So yeah, just we go slide by slide. I just want to like pause on one part of it to make sure everyone's the same language. So sublicense means I'm a player, I'm a quarterback for Ohio State, and Ohio State has a deal with Nike for their uniforms. And if Nike wants to do a commercial and I'm in it, that's a sublicense of whatever rights I have. I have no rights to do anything. That's essentially what that aspect of it is, just for clarity.
I don't know if it actually involves commercials though.
It could, but that's like an example of like
I
if
can
Ohio
understand.
State does a deal,
Right.
they can use the name, image, and likeness in something like that.
Yeah, to sell a jersey of, Will Howard.
It doesn't have
jersey.
to be a big $20 billion campaign. It could be as little as I could do X, but they're not getting more money if Ohio State cuts another deal broadly beyond there, separate from the part what they might be able to do on their own.
Absolutely. But I would think that this would also include college football, the new EA college football games. Well, the more players that sign on to this type of understanding, they're just going to automatically be included in it. So you're going to get more complete rosters than you do currently. Moving on, the 7-page memorandum of understanding, that's the MOU, includes languages that says schools will be reimbursed for some revenue already paid should an athlete transfer to a different school or even enter the transfer portal, and allows the school to adjust the payment up or down as a reflection of the athlete's performance. Okay, we're going to pause right there. So basically, if somebody jumps in the portal, transfers for any reason, the school can come back on them and say, you owe us X amount of dollars. It also says that if we signed you as a 3-star and you turn into a 5-star value player, we can ask for an even more significant return.
Right. And I think for me, so I want to be really clear, and Moen can attest, I obviously am a Miami fan. I am not looking at this specific thing, because if the ACC has a specific deal like this, I would say the exact same thing. I'm looking at it as somebody who has done brand deals and endorsement deals with artists and entertainment industry. So I have an understanding of that aspect of it. This is athletes, it's a little bit different. And with the football, it's a little bit different. But if I was talking to a lawyer on that first part, I can see a lawyer, repping or a collective bargaining association go, well, it depends upon when this happens, right? Because if I was there for all of the season and value a college football season and my brand deal is in the 5 months, I shouldn't lose 7 months worth because you got more of the value on executing any of the name, image, or likeness during that period. I'm not saying they should do that. That could be complicated. That's what a lawyer could potentially do. And I guess the transfer portal question is like, what happens if they are a high school student who comes in January and they enter the portal in the following December, where they were there for like 11 months and a day or something like that, based off of whatever that was. So, I think it's pretty interesting to see how they might carve it up.
Yeah, adjust the payment up or down as a reflection of the athlete's performance. So that really,
but it's not pay per play.
Yeah, but I mean, there has to be some fixed rate system there. Say you bring a kid on for $250,000, he enters a transfer portal and gets $1 million deal. Are you going to go then to the kid and say, okay, pay us back our $250,000 plus $250,000 out of your new deal?
Right. And I think this is like where the edge of, are you an employee or not? So if you are an influencer, right, you could imagine, hey, I started off doing stuff and I had whatever, 500,000 followers on TikTok, and brand does a deal with me. If 8 months later I have like 4 million, my rate's not going to be the same for you. So that's how they could be trying to work around the athlete, but it changes because they're fundamentally prohibited from doing certain things. Like they can't go work for another school, right, during that. Whereas an influencer might be able to sit there and say, all right, cool, I have a category exclusive with you and Coke versus Pepsi, but I can still maybe do an orange juice deal or something. They can still do other stuff.
a non-compete clause, basically.
Yeah, and not yeah, but they can compete in other areas where like a
Right.
football player's core DNA is they can't play for Ohio State and go play for Wisconsin at the same time.
Moving on, the MOU contains a morals clause, requires the athlete to be in good academic standing to be eligible to receive payments, and explicitly asserts the agreement is not pay for play, leaving the door open for the deal to be terminated without further payment should the laws change.
Morals clauses are very common in NIL kind of or brand sponsorship deals. You know, somebody gets a commercial and they get arrested for a violent crime or something. Those deals go away, and it's like for a cause they got terminated from the deal. So those are not, without going into the details of what they're specifically saying, the broad thing of like that's a common thing in contracts.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the morals clause, and they're right. If some reason Congress should step in and say you can't do it this way anymore, and their employees, that makes sense that they shouldn't be on the hook for that, and then have them as employees. So,
yeah, my only issue here is the implying, saying they're not employees, but they're definitely putting stuff in this so far that is basically like skirting the line. It's like a definition of is kind of lawyer crap.
yeah, legalese. Before we move on, I want to get to some more comments here. We try and read as many comments as we can on Mowing After Dark. This is your guys' show. Just has my name on it and rock stars in it. 22 degrees Fahrenheit and snowing in southern West Virginia. I'm a little north of you. I'm close to Athens, Ohio, so it's currently 12 degrees and snowing here. Ryan Willie checks in, lets us know negative 25 to negative 20 to negative 25 wind chill tomorrow morning in Wisconsin.
Well, that explains everything then over this weekend. There's a lot of salty people right now in Madison.
Wisconsin, it is cold. It is cold. It's going to be cold everywhere, guys. But yeah, those people, there's going to be places that are going to be 50 below. So stay warm, Ryan. Stay inside if you can. Some of us can't. So, but I made sure to put the cardboard over the grill on the truck so my block doesn't freeze. Bill G says the lap pool is still open. Sure. I would go swimming in 27 degrees. Wouldn't bother me.
It's not the swimming in the 27 degrees that's bad. It's the getting out and stop swimming part that's hellacious.
I don't know. It's something great about a hot tub on a winter night. Wish I could afford one. Timothy Green says, please hit that like, subscribe, share, comment. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Timothy Green. It is much appreciated. Scavin, yes, rolled in here. He says, hello, gentlemen. Go Big Red and go Bucks. He is pulling for the Buckeyes tomorrow night. Thank you, Nebraska fans. Timothy Green would like to congratulate the West Virginia men's basketball team for beating number 2 Iowa State last night. Let's go Mountaineers. Basketball. Yeah, I heard it was Jerry West night there. Jerry West. Did you ever watch the HBO series about the Lakers where they had the guy play Jerry West?
I did.
And Jerry West came out and was like, I wasn't like that all the time.
Just
great show. If you haven't seen it, great show. It only lasts 2 seasons, but it's a really great show. Stormy Cyclone says, hi guys, possible chaos tomorrow night. Definitely the off season. Brother, you ain't kidding. There's chaos everywhere. It's freezing cold. We've got a national championship game. We've got conferences now at each other's throats. Illini Ted says there was a time when the Big Ten had Delaney that other conferences would look to them for guidance. I think that time has passed. So if other conferences do things differently, this could be a mess. We'll get into that.
Maybe they can all form an alliance.
Expedition Greg says, what's up, Moen? Rock and Rant, OH, IO, go Bucks. Thank you for being a member for 10 months, Greg. I'm going to stay inside tomorrow night. I ordered my pizza from Donato's. I got a Block O pizza. So I got to go pick up the pizza. I do have to leave the house, but yeah, should be a good time. Looking for number 9. All right, so let's move on here. We're all caught up on comments, so I get right back to this article. Let me change to the next slide from Mr. Winter. Separately, it establishes a set of representations, warranties, and covenants that includes the seemingly contradictory promise the athlete will not make any similar commitment to enroll at or compete in athletics for another college or university. So we don't know what was cut out there between make and any, but
Yeah.
apparently they didn't think it was pertinent enough. But I would like to know what was cut out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that they're just stating that on the one hand, it's saying the transfer portal exists, and the other hand, they're saying this.
Yeah. Of course, the NCAA, if you didn't catch our show on Friday, the NCAA declared that the transfer portal doesn't exist.
The transfer portal exists. It's just not the path, according to the NCAA, that you must
Yes.
take. It's more like a clearinghouse of, hey, date me, or don't
Yeah.
date, or I'm here, but don't swipe on me.
Yeah, it's basically Tinder. Moving on, and I believe this is the last slide from this. Although the MOU is ostensibly not about the athlete's play, it notes the school reserves the right to increase or decrease payments in reflection of their performance. The MOU mentions 2 illustrations. The player wins a Heisman Trophy or sees their playing time reduced. Although the MOU maintains the relevance of developments concerning the promotional value of using the athlete's NIL, they are obviously linked to the athlete's play.
Yeah. For most players, for 90+% of players, that would be different. Like an example I could think of that isn't like that I know of would be like the Cavender twins in Miami and women's basketball, right? Who have a massive social following, but and they're decent, and one of the sisters is having a pretty good year, especially, but their social value to like an NIL deal might outweigh their overall skills, and they're probably not winning the Naismith Award for women's basketball or something like that.
Yeah, and again, this is all controlled but in this particular document, this is all controlled by the school, not the athlete.
Right.
So if the athlete wins the Heisman, there's no guarantee they raise that rate.
Correct. It's their discretion.
Yes. If the athlete blows out his ACL and MCL playing in the 3rd game of the season, they could potentially decrease it, according to this. The linkage between play and NIL is also apparent in how the MOU addresses a player transferring. The school agrees to take reasonable steps not to actively use the athlete's NIL after the athlete plays for another team. The school, however, stresses it can, quote unquote, sell off products with the athlete's NIL and reserves the right to use the NIL for archival purposes and historical signage.
Yeah. I don't think those are onerous of themselves, right? The second part could be, depending on what that use is. But if it stays within that that construct, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. And most schools probably, it's almost like self-evident, right? Most schools are probably not going to want to continue to promote a player who is now playing for somebody they are playing against or could play against in the future and left the school. That seems like not a good use of your resources or time or brand partnerships.
Yes, and this comes down to pretty much the Chris Spielman lawsuit against Ohio State. They were using Chris Spielman's image, name, likeness in promoting stuff well after he retired. So he wasn't getting paid for it, obviously, and he went to bat for himself, and that's one of the reasons we have NIL. So that's a thing. So even let's say Cam Ward can't come back another season, right? He's
right, correct.
But let's say like Carson Beck. Say Carson Beck had a great season this year, won the national championship, declared for the draft, then undeclared for the draft. In that scenario, Georgia could still use Carson Beck's time, signage, image, name, time at Georgia to promote that year's national championship 20 years from now.
Correct. And if I was like, the archival part of it is fine, but taking it to like a really bad degree of putting out like a retro Carson Beck shoe 20 years from now
Right.
that he wore, that I think would be problematic, and we get their asses sued regardless of what is in this kind of contract, and or MOU as it is now, contract in potentially 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, all right, that was the last highlight that Mitt had there. Again, I would suggest we linked it earlier. I'll go ahead and pop it in the chat again. The link to the full Sportico article. I do suggest you read it. Please have an ad block installed. But this is something that is predicated on something that has not even passed yet.
Correct. And let's say this was a year ago, right? And the only thing different was that there wasn't a new inauguration coming up, right? Where theoretically policies could change, but they may not change fast. You know, everyone wants to think that all of this world is super important to a new administration. My guess is that it's really not. And but let's say, you know, it was a year ago, you could have signed this contract back in December, right? And they could have talked about like the revenue. It's not a contract, by the way. It's my bad language. It's MOU. You can't literally call it a contract. You might be able to say that you got paid something up front, which I don't believe that Xavier Lucas, as an example, has. But you have to get consideration in order for it to be a contract. This is more like saying, I'm going to rent a place in your state if I get a job there in a few months. And then the question is, well, I got a job in another state. You can't really hold me to it because your bill ain't even done yet, right? But the whole situation with the contract, the memo of understanding is things haven't happened yet. And let's say that they had said, oh, we think you're going to get whatever, $300,000 under the revenue share deal because Wisconsin or whatever school, keep it neutral, $20.5 million. Well, if the whole Title IX thing that just came up actually didn't get wiped away or interpretation didn't get wiped away, do they have a contingency of, oh, sorry, actually you didn't get 4,000 and you now signed this contract? Like they're not going to have, that's why it's hard to sign a contract before something is really enacted, let alone something else that could come into play like the Title IX discussion, which may be a brief discussion, a moment in time and go away, or it could actually be pretty material depending upon how that gets sorted.
Absolutely. So now we understand how memos of understanding work in the Big Ten based off of that source. But let's get down. Now we'll actually get down to brass tacks. Let's say hello to get some more comments in here. Clay Johansson says, go blue. I say that not as an endorsement. He is just speaking about everybody in the Midwest tomorrow will be going blue. Ryan Willie says he has to stay inside. The battery in his chair will die. Yeah, I got a truck the same way, man. I got to put cardboard all the way around that sumbitch. Stop that block from freezing over. So I'm glad you'll be inside and staying warm, Ryan. Sergeant Pickles stopping in. Good evening, all. Just win, baby. Go Buckeyes. Thank you, Sergeant Pickles. Just a reminder, guys, we will not have a Big Ten Mafia show tomorrow night due to the national championship game. If you're not watching the game live, go ahead and head over to Greg Pflugar's Peek Around the Corner channel. He's having a watch party. Okay. Now let's talk about Miami, Wisconsin, the Big Ten, the romantic fallout and foibles, tampering. According to the Big Ten, I'm just telling you what the Big Ten says, Rock. You don't have to yell at me. According to the Big Ten, they had a gentleman's agreement among the other A4 conferences on what does and does not constitute tampering, and that the conferences would, in fact, step in and try and enforce some of this stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a number of thoughts, and again, whatever like bias you want to put on, but if I was not involved in this situation, if they're saying they're going to not do tampering or to try to do tampering issues related to these new MOUs, aka contracts in Big Ten language, even though they're not contracts yet, they're MOUs. I would say, interesting, ACC, Big Ten, SEC, Pac-12, Pac-2, all of you guys. So you're collectively deciding to adhere to the terms of actually not contracts to reduce the marketplace ahead of them actually being viable as contracts with conditions that don't exist yet. But but you don't want to get them as employees and you don't want to do collective bargaining. So that's what I would say about that whole, like, we have this gentleman's agreement around these contracts. Separately, I have no idea what the definition of what tampering is that they're accusing Miami of. I have a pretty good idea, like, hey guys, be super careful if you're living in a glass house about what discovery would be in a lawsuit, because receipts are out there for a lot of people, and I know some people want to act like no one does it. I'd say, to me, even accidental being aware of stuff is a degree of certain people having dirt on their hands and other people being covered in mud when it's all said and done. So I don't know whether or not Miami did something improper around contacting Xavier Lucas, or Xavier Lucas contacted him. American Heritage let Miami know. I literally have no idea, so I'm not going to speculate. I do know one thing for sure, is that there's no aspect of not putting a kid's transfer papers into the portal, because even if you were going to take action against Miami, which if you have the evidence, you should do that. That doesn't prohibit Xavier Lucas from going to any other number of school that might be available to him if he was in the portal, and saying that these contracts, which are not contracts yet, would prohibit that, while at the same time talking about access to the portal, seems to contradict it. And now I think all of you are possibly colluding to, like, put contracts into place that aren't actually enforceable, but you're doing it that way. Because if you're saying these contracts are available now and we'll do a gentleman's agreement, then what would be the point of letting Xavier Lucas go into a portal? Because no other conferences would touch him, right? Forget about Miami's tampering. If you're saying these agreements are going to be respected before house settlement is done, what's the purpose of the portal if nobody can contact you because you're all respecting the agreement? And I know it's a lot of babble. Hopefully it makes some sense. You know, if Wisconsin has evidence against Miami, bring it out, right? Sue them. I have a personal gut is that this whole thing was a statement to help us to Congress, to pacify fans, to, you know, throw down a gauntlet. I wonder whether or not the first thing you would do if you're really going to take any litigation would be to put out this kind of statement. It's not normally what happens, but maybe they are. And maybe, you know, all this gets settled and there's a overriding thing that will never change, which is, hey, maybe this caused a damage between Miami's relationship with the Big Ten and Wisconsin, regardless of how it all plays out. And that's like a whole other level of what could be going down.
Absolutely. And I want to make a clarification here. Tampering has nothing to do with the MOUs. Tampering, the way they define it, is personnel from a particular school reaches out and contacts a player before they have officially entered the transfer portal. Now, we understand this Friday, the transfer portal suddenly stopped existing. So, tampering is now based on a indefinite thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a different thing outside the transfer portal about schools contacting other players. I think there's like a bylaw, but I'm not 100% sure, so I could be wrong. I'm only following through that. Like, if you say that Miami is tampering, there's no provision in the transfer portal rules, even before the NCAA said what they said on Friday about, like, yes, you have an alternate path of unenrolling and enrolling. There is nothing that says you must enter the kid into the transfer portal within 48 hours unless you think a school or schools are tampering. That doesn't exist, right? So even if you had a smoking gun video evidence of Mario Cristobal, like, having a live conversation with Xavier Lucas, that still wouldn't have absolved Wisconsin from making Xavier Lucas in the portal for any of the other 132 schools in, you know, FBS who would want him to be there. And all I'm kind of doing is following the thought process, though, that if you then do that, and then there's a separate gentleman's agreement about the MOUs, the transfer portal would be useless to him too, because if everybody else is respecting the MOUs that are theoretically being bandied about by one or multiple conferences ahead of house settlement, no one would take them anyway.
Right. And the other point I want to bring up, and I mentioned it in our group chat last night, but I'll mention it here because obviously not everybody here is in our group chat. I have heard this said about 50 times. Everybody does it. It happens all the time, et cetera, et cetera. I have not seen anybody produce a shred of evidence. If you want me to believe you, I want to see the evidence. I want to see the body. I want to see the murder weapon before I convict somebody. It's just, and we get all these illusions and people saying, well, Xavier this, but remember Tyler Van Dyke, or, just anybody mentioning Caleb Downs. Remember Caleb Downs with Ohio State? Anybody. Show me proof. I mean, if it's that rampant, and if it's that rampant and pervasive, and everybody's doing it, and everybody knows they're doing it, why is there not any evidence made available to the public?
Well, I think that people are, not necessarily looking to air everyone's dirty laundry versus having it in their back end, but maybe it's all going to come to a head. I think that the thing that bothers me the most on all of it is, look, if Miami they have evidence against Miami, then they should bring it, right? And then we'll find out. But the holier than art thou part of any of these schools or any of these conferences, because to me, all of this ultimately is in the favor of the schools and the organizations and not the students still. That MOU contract that they just said is so one-sided towards the member institutions, and if that's similar for the other four, good lawyers are going to rip that crap apart no matter whether it's a boilerplate or not, and it's going to be all sorts of addendums unless they put a most favored nations clause into every one of those so that everybody has to have the same type of baseline, if not the exact same money. But there was a tweet from somebody else, and I can't remember it. I think I shared it, where if the Big Ten is so outraged about this, then isn't it interesting how, when a coach got negotiated on from another school to come to a Big Ten, I think they were alluding to Kurt Signetti going to Indiana from James Madison, then several James Madison students followed through that, of course, Big Ten would talk about that too, if they're so outraged about this. And, I just don't like intellectual inconsistency, no matter who is doing it. And I have called out my own school in the past, as Moen knows, from the beginning. I have the green and orange filters, but I'm not like a blindside homer on this crap. So let's find out what happens.
And as far as I'm concerned, Ohio State did nothing wrong ever.
Of course.
I want to bring this up.
You got so big by being so pure. It helped Ohio State ascend to the mountains, and God made it happen.
That's true. On the 8th day. Aren't MOUs usually used for union contracts? Is that a sign of things to come with athletes becoming unionized employees? I will say this: MOUs have traditionally been used in college coaching searches. Before they sign a contract, they sign a memoranda of understanding. This is an issue that Greg Schiano had with Tennessee, I believe, about 8 years ago. If you recall, before they hired Jeremy Pruitt, they had hired or signed a memorandum of understanding with Greg Schiano to become the new head coach at Tennessee. Fans, poo-pooed it. They wanted Jeremy Pruitt badly. They basically bullied the AD into saying that they weren't going to honor the MOU. I believe that was all settled out of court and nobody was allowed to discuss anything. But if there was a settlement and Tennessee was willing to settle, that means that schools have to understand, or you would have to think that they understand that there has to be some sort of contractual bondage with an MOU, even if there's not an actual contractual bondage.
Well, there's an example of that right now, but there's a fundamental difference, and I guess it depends upon what evidence or who you believe or don't believe, right? Bill Belichick and Mike Lombardi at North Carolina have not signed their contracts. It was reported, and Mike Lombardi was on Pat McAfee saying that they basically are in an MOU. But according to Mike Lombardi, at least, I don't know if he said this for Bill Belichick, Mike Lombardi's contract is not done. He's the GM for North Carolina, but he has been getting paid. So now you have an MOU with consideration. Consideration being like, he's at least being paid. If you went to court on that, you'd have a better chance of turning it into enforced. It's still a gray area. It's not guaranteed to be enforceable, which is the whole thing with Bill Belichick and the NFL, because he hasn't signed his contract. Does the buyout of $1 or $10 million even apply if he were to take an NFL job? But at least there was compensation. According to Xavier's lawyer, as it relates to the MOU or contract in Wisconsin's terms, he did not receive anything yet. So he has not received consideration from that. The other thing I think Wisconsin did that was a mistake in their public statement, because they could have a lot of stuff that's backing what they're saying, is alluding to the collective. There's like no part of what they were doing about this specific issue, which was an internal MOU to the athletic department, to the football program versus the third party collective. That's almost immaterial to the conversation that they're having. And they probably hurt themselves by seeming like they're working in collaboration with their collective, which I think everybody suspects and knows is really what happens for everybody, but technically you're not supposed to be doing.
So they've got a super chat for our friend the Evil Badger here. Let me give him his evil laugh. There we go. Thank you for the super chat, Ryan Willie. It is appreciated. Like Greg said earlier, you don't mess with Wisconsin. Wisconsin and Michigan led the way, getting Nebraska out of the AAU. There's an additional component to that, Ryan. I'm not sure if you were aware of it. The University of Texas also led the way, and a lot of it had to do with Nebraska leaving the Big 12. But yes,
Yep.
Michigan and Wisconsin did vote them out after they were admitted to the Big 10.
Hey, and that may be the case, and maybe in the long run that could impact. I mean, I would think it'd be kind of messed up to not do $1 billion relationship that you would have otherwise done over one player in one situation. But like, hey, people are petty. That can happen. I'd also say 10 people of your 85-man roster were from Florida, and 8 of them are from South Florida. And American Heritage is one of the top 10 schools in America for producing talent. So good luck. I'm not sure if this is the look that you really want from a recruiting perspective, even if ultimately you might even be right. We'll see whether or not that happens. Sometimes, again, people talk big. Sometimes they don't do anything. But other people can make it more difficult for you to recruit in a hotbed as well.
Yeah, great point, by the way, Ryan Willie. But yeah, like I said, the way it was explained to me, Texas basically pushed the issue on Nebraska not having their medical school on campus being the reason to kick them out of the AAU. Wisconsin and Michigan just had to oblige because that was the letter of the law. But thank you for the comment.
I think it'll be interesting because I know there's people who don't believe, and I know it's also happened in the past where it's been used as an excuse. If and when it's more obvious to people who aren't saying it from like a Miami circle that Xavier's dad is in fact sick and has had health issues that help them be part of that. Like if that winds up being true, that convinces most people that's also not a good look.
Now here's the question I got to ask you. And you're a Miami fan, so obviously I know you're not a pro ACC guy. I'm not going to get into the realignment complications or implications tonight, obviously. But do you feel kind of let down that Jim Phillips had a chance to comment on this today and chose instead to comment about Clemson, Notre Dame, and securing a second automatic qualifier for the ACC through some form of end of conference tournament?
Not let down because I had no thought that he would come to defend Miami. I don't know. I know the question you're talking about in terms of like being at the meetings and hearing some of the stuff about the Notre Dame Clemson stuff. I don't know. I assume some reporter was smart enough to ask him the obvious question in the room, but I don't know if he just didn't take the opportunity to address it versus didn't answer an actual question on it. Bravery for Jim Phillips isn't really something that I think. Maybe they're trying to settle this all behind closed doors, right? Maybe Jim Phillips isn't on the Miami train because despite only Clemson and FSU suing them, maybe the other 3 or 4 schools aren't as good graces right now. And so there's backhand stuff. I had no expectations. I also have 0 expectations. I'll be pleasantly surprised if Miami comments. I don't necessarily think that means it's a sign of innocence or guilt. It's just like a sign of normalcy, where Miami hasn't really commented in anything other than the most vague things ever over the last year and a half or so.
Sure, but don't you think, I mean, the Big Ten came out, we can argue whether there was any real,
I think they should. I think they should comment.
Okay.
I think this like part of like public communications and background in the media and sports is like a thing that I've literally done for like got paid to do.
Sure.
And I thought Mario, I'll give you an example. I thought Mario had a really great answer the other day on his press conference when they were announcing the new defensive coordinator about the Cam Ward Pop-Tarts Bowl, right? And people think he was quitting. It was a really great answer. And it was like 3 weeks too late, because he opened up a can of worms there. If he had said it the next day when the narrative was going, it would be fine. The exact same words. Really good way of addressing it then. Really terrible way of doing it now. Like, I think Miami does not do itself any favors in some of the public-facing comments, and it drives me batshit crazy.
And I agree with you. I don't think the school should be commenting. Again, if there was a gentleman's agreement between the A4 conferences, this isn't a thing that should be between the conferences. it just strikes me as odd that they're doing it behind closed doors and the Big Ten issues a statement on a Saturday.
Yeah, and if it is a thing, then I don't know. Was it a gentleman's agreement? Who was in the room? Did the ACC convey it to all of everybody? I assume that they would, but the ACC doesn't even know if they have a TV contract for 2027, and we're waiting on that. So I will be the last person to think that the ACC can't continue to have ongoing moments of incompetence.
Okay. Okay. I bring it up because I do know that at one point last year, the Big 12 stepped in to stop tampering at another Big 10 school. So that's just, and there was never a statement issued by the Big Ten then. It just kind of strikes me as odd that it's issued now. It's issued when they're doing it on a Saturday too. I mean, really, when have you known anybody in corporate America to get up off their ass on a Saturday?
Well, and the other thing that's interesting, I have a lot of questions, both for Miami and Wisconsin, right? But Wisconsin, I think, and Ryan may be able to correct me, but like roughly 20 players went into the portal this last period. Is Xavier Lucas the only one that was good enough to already get his like future contract under the house settlement done, and everybody else didn't have that yet? Like what was going on in that regard as well? Like, so I don't know. I know with the Big Ten and internal stuff sometimes stays internal. Maybe, well, I know maybe the Big Ten reached out to the ACC and didn't get satisfaction, and they put him on blast, right?
Okay.
Very possible that that's what happened too. That they tried to absolve it, behind closed doors, more diplomatically, and maybe they were rebuffed by the ACC or Miami. I literally have no idea. I could see multiple different paths of what did or did not happen.
And to be honest, none of us have any idea. We basically go off of statements and what one party is saying against the other party. No evidence has been presented to show that Miami tampered. Wisconsin hasn't shown it yet. I mean, if they were really serious, I'd think you would be willing to show it. But again, this is a situation we're getting into because there's absolutely no guardrails in college football anymore.
It's a shit show.
It's a giant shit show. As of Friday, like I went to sleep on Thursday night. There's a transfer portal. Friday afternoon, I get home. There's no transfer portal anymore, and it's just literally the NCAA saying, well, yeah, but it's not real in tech. It exists.
There's a back door. There's a workaround for the moment that could not exist in a week, right? They could do an emergency rule change about something. I don't know that they would. But the NCAA and all of these guys keep getting in their own way. And fundamentally, some of the things they want to do, I agree with. It would be great. Like the coaches had their meetings this week. It would be great if the transfer portal was like a 10-day period after, in January. I get that. Like I understand that it would make life easier. But the reason why they keep getting dunked on is they keep proposing rules in the same categories of things that have already been told they can't do. So treating football players with less time to transfer than an ordinary student without having a CBA or an employment status in is just going to get sued again too, right? Like the concept of the stability we need to have makes total sense to me. I understand the need for it. All of this drives crazy too, but it has to get cleaned up, right?
Yes, there has to be a solution. And the more I'm thinking about it, I think that maybe the NCAA just needs to get blown up. The A4 joins in with the G6. They just separate completely from the NCAA. They can still allow their teams to participate in the NCAA basketball tournament if they want to. They can put on their own basketball tournament, but you're right. It's just a shit show, and every solution creates more problems. Every time they come up with one solution, they create 3 problems because of the solution.
It's nutso. I mean, that's why I'm looking forward to, even if we get a Wisconsin penalty for 5 years or 10 years, if and when Miami ever comes to the Big Ten, I figure we needed a trophy, which is why I have, the Xavier Lucas NIL Classic, and that could go back and forth between Miami and Wisconsin if we ever resolve this, since we don't have an axe. But I'm thinking forward. What is a solution to bring us all together? And it's the Golden Contract Award.
Absolutely. But listen, this is just the first one. I I strongly believe there's going to be plenty of these moving forward, especially now that the transfer portal, we found out there's a workaround to it that apparently was obvious to everyone.
Yeah. I mean, there is one thing I don't think we have to worry about, even with the new ruling, that like, hey, a player can leave after week 4 and go play for school week 5. The technicality of the NCAA ruling is you had to be unenrolled from somewhere else and you have to enroll by somewhere. For Miami, as an example, that's actually Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay.
So you wouldn't be able to, but like that's not the same for everybody, right? Miami starts schools, I want to say like in August classes, but there are some schools on the West Coast that are on trimester systems or start later in September. So week 1 for one, last day to enroll for one might be different for another. So it still could be a Wild West based off of that, barring any other rules that prohibit you from playing for 2 teams in 1 year that I just don't know. But I don't know that we would have as much in season. But then again, I should listen to my own words and like never say never.
Timothy Green, Moen and Rocking Rant would just like to say another great show as usual. Thank you for all you do for fans like us. Thank you for all the
Thanks,
fans
Timothy.
do for us. We wouldn't be doing this show if we were just talking to each other. It would get pretty boring.
Yes, someone wants to listen to us blabber.
Yeah, really? We got to have your guys' feedback. Stormy Cyclone says, is Wisconsin in the Big Ten trying to make an example out of this Lucas guy, trying to deter future tampering? I can't discern their motives. Like we know what they did, but I can't discern their motives at all.
Yeah, I just think, sometimes the obvious thing that you want to do isn't maybe necessarily the thing you should do in the long run. For both schools, really.
Yeah, I think for all parties. Clay Johansson says Nebraska Medical School was in Omaha. That's correct. It still is. So if I remember right, since it is not on campus, it didn't count. That's correct. The letter of the law was held. They weren't able to use it and show that they had medical research, which contributed to being an AAU member. And Texas made an issue of it. But Wisconsin and Michigan, of course, they did have to abide by the letter of the law and kick Nebraska out, which they conveniently did after Nebraska was a member of the Big Ten Conference, so that they could still say we didn't accept a non-AAU member into our conference. Ryan Willie clarifies 20 to 25 players hit the portal. I would think a lot of those were offensive guys due to Phil Longo leaving.
Yeah, and I would bet Moen's whiskey bottle that some of those 20 to 25 players heard from people before they were in the portal.
Right. Again, this can all be clarified if people would just show evidence. Ryan Willie with the $2 super chat. Thank you, Ryan. Much appreciated, sir. Let's get a little Keith Jackson for you.
We're gonna play football. Yippee!
For the record, I'm upset with Miami, not the player.
Well, I'll say you're a Wisconsin fan. You have every right to feel however you want to feel about the situation, absent evidence. I know the Wisconsin boards are probably going crazy with Miami's been talking to them since like 7 months ago or something like that, whether they have facts or not on that as well. My take would be slightly different about it. Let's wait and see how it plays out. It wasn't like Miami and him didn't have a relationship before. I mean, Wisconsin beat Miami out for his recruitment, but it wasn't like they didn't have a relationship beforehand. So if you're recruiting nowadays, period, right? Coming in second or third for a kid's recruitment is not it's why more schools are giving the visits and stuff, because even if you come in second or third, you might become first or second on their wish list if they somehow decide to move on from a coaching change. They don't like, they're homesick, whatever it might be. All schools are really trying to also, they want to win those recruitments, but they're also trying to come in the top 3 so that they're first of mind if and when somebody decides they want to make a change. But I get it, Ryan.
I would just say, again, nothing fuels speculation like silence. If they would just put some evidence out there, I think it would help a lot of people make up their minds. I mean, Rock, you might even change your mind and go, oh, shit, yeah, this coach that was a coach for Miami was having contact with this kid back in October.
If there's real evidence, show it. Like, I would understand. And it is what it is. Like, I never said, oh, wow, Nevin Shapiro was Miami got railroaded. Not on that one. Other ones I thought, but he was an idiot, right? Like, it was plain as day. They should have figured it out. and I will send Moen a message that like if somehow one day evidence comes out, like I can actually predict where it would have come from. And I will send that for Moen for a rainy day on Twitter so he knows that I'm not just making up an idea now, but I'm not going to put people's names out there for no reason.
I believe you. I believe you. Trust me, I believe you. Thank you for the super chat again, Ryan. It is much appreciated, sir. But yeah, interesting topic to discuss tonight. If you're watching us on demand, I know a lot of people are, you're probably catching the end of that or the second half of the NFL game. I'm sure that's starting about shortly. If you're watching on demand tomorrow, feel free to leave us a comment. Rock and I read the comments. We will respond to the comments. Good way to get your voice heard. Illini Ted popping in here says tampering is a very hard thing to prove. I'm sure it happens all the time, but let's not forget many athletes transfer to programs that also recruited them, which you just mentioned. So there was a relationship established. That's a good question. I don't really know enough about the gentleman Xavier Lucas. Was he recruited by Miami?
He was. He's from American Heritage, which is like not. I don't want to say it's a feeder school from Miami, but it's kind of a feeder school. But they put so much talent into high school recruiting. So there's players from that school all over the place. But it is one of the ones like I follow recruiting, but I'm not obsessed with recruiting. I've gotten less obsessed as the portal has rendered half of that useless in the long run. But yes, he was recruited from there. He's a South Florida kid. Miami, I think, got on him a little bit later in the game, but was actively trying to recruit him. I don't remember if Xavier did like, here's the hats and I choose one, but Miami was definitely in the running, and clearly Miami has a lot of contacts with American Heritage, but like there's a difference, right, of like how you find out some things. Again, I don't know. It's not like I have a secret text message stash of all the communications that did or did not happen. So I'm just talking about like theoretically what it would be.
Yeah, and I assume American Heritage is one of those private schools like IMG Academy is up by Tampa, where they get scholarships to go there.
Nothing's like IMG Academy, right. But yeah, listen, there's a lot of transferring between programs in South Florida and in Florida high schools in general, whether it's public, private, it happens all the time, right? That's why you have somebody like, I mean, you're ever gonna have a story again like Teddy Bridgewater retiring, going to coach's high school, which is a public school, Miami Northwestern, leading them to an amazing season, and then actually coming back to the pros, being the second straight quarterback, and actually having to get in the game because Jared Goff got hurt. Like South Florida football is just crazy in general.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up, folks. That's kind of all we really had to talk about tonight. We kind of already made our picks for the national championship game, but do you have anything to say on that before we take off, Rock?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think it's a 31-17, 31-21 kind of game for Ohio State. If we're all lucky, the world won't implode regardless of the results of that game. And for me, if Notre Dame scores on the first drive, then I'll think we might have a game. If not, I don't expect it to be as close a game. I think they've pulled out a couple of really great wins, and more power to them. But like I said, my favorite thing is to think about, I mentioned this on Friday, the speculation if Notre Dame loses that everyone's going to have a conspiracy that Marcus Freeman was a plant because he's an Ohio State alum.
Listen, he's apparently not the only Ohio State alum the Chicago Bears are interested in. I don't know if you saw this. Heisman Trophy winner Eddie George.
I did see that.
Coach at Tennessee State, I believe, has shown the interest has been shown in him. This is all the Deion Sanders effect. I mean, look at all the Michael Vick, Deshaun Jackson, Eddie George. I know I'm missing some people.
Yeah.
All these ex-players now becoming head coaches.
It's definitely interesting. Eddie George, sometimes you just need to have the right leader who can get the right people together. Like whether that is Eddie George, I have no idea. But it'd be interesting to see what happened. Obviously those two Detroit coordinators are now actively available to go somewhere.
Yeah, and Marshall Faulk, I heard the rumor Marshall Faulk was heading to Colorado to be the new running backs coach.
Yeah, I saw that as well. So then he'll have Marshall, he'll have Warren Sapp, among others on his staff. They're definitely not short of personalities there.
They're definitely not short of NFL Hall of Famers there.
Yeah, a lot of gold jackets worth.
Lots of gold
going around
jackets
Colorado.
on those Colorado sidelines. But I hope for a good game tomorrow. And by good game, I hope Ohio State blows them out. All right, let's have a drink, Rock, and we
Cheers.
will take off.
Cheers to NIL.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you would, please give us a like, leave us a comment. If you're not a subscriber yet, feel free to subscribe. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. I would like to personally thank Bill G for gifting 5 members to the College Football Mafia family. Thank you very much, Bill G. Check out those. If you got one of those, make sure you thank Bill G. I saw somebody thanked him in the comments, but go ahead and thank him in the on-demand comments if you would. Expedition Greg was a member for 10 months. Thank you, Expedition Greg. I'm sure you're hoping for a big blowout tomorrow as well. And then our friendly evil badger, Ryan Willie, giving us the super chats. Ryan, please stay warm tomorrow.
Thanks, Ryan.
And we will catch you guys next week. Same Moen time, same College Football Mafia channel.